When I was 25 and a half, I started a podcast. The goal? To review some of the newest and latest movies, along with some other stuff. With the help of my guests, I was able to do this, but there were dark forces tampering with my podcast, and with me. They called it an improvised podcast for some reason. I eventually found help in the form of myself. Yes, the me from a universe where the movies I reviewed got delayed. Apparently, my podcast made it to his universe. I know now that it is my duty, for the good of that universe, nay, the multiverse, to keep recapping and reviewing these movies, to hold listeners over until they could eventually see the movies as they were made in their world. For some reason, they come out differently in my world, but it's kind of entertaining that way. My name is Steven Schinder, and this is Delayed Replay. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we talk movies. I'm your host, Steven Schinder, as always, and this episode is about Godzilla vs. Kong, which came out last November. So, yeah, it came out a few months ago, but still want to talk about it. And here with me to talk about the MonsterVerse is Mr. Multiverse. How are you doing this evening or night or whatever it is over there?
I'm feeling good. I'm really excited to talk about this movie because I think it's going to be a great juxtaposition between me and you because I'm a massive monster movie fan and you're not.
Right. Yeah, because with the Shang-Chi one, I feel like I have a good enough grasp on the Marvel movies, even if I haven't read much of the Marvel comics. But here, it's like this genre is like there are some things about it where I don't understand some of the appeal. So this is really interesting territory, and I think we'll get some interesting viewpoints between the two of us. It'll make like a nice contrast.
I guess, yeah, let's jump right into it.
Yeah, so I guess before we get into the movie proper, we can go into like sort of our backgrounds. What have your experiences been with like other Godzilla and Kong media growing up?
For me, it's always been like this has been like me growing up. Like I've been with Godzilla since I was 2. There's actually an interesting story where I was born with a blood clot in my heart, and in order to have surgery, I couldn't fall asleep for the heart with my down and die. So my dad put on a bunch of Godzilla videos to keep me awake until it was time for surgery. So in a way, Godzilla saved my life.
Oh wow, yeah, I was just gonna say, so Godzilla kept you alive.
Yeah. And funny enough, like when I had another surgery when I was around 7 or 8, I had actually watched my great grandmother had bought the original Godzilla versus Kong movie, and after I got a surgery, I got another Godzilla film. So he's just been around me since ever.
Nice. Were there like major favorites of yours that stood above the rest in your view as you sort of got through the franchise? Like, did you try watching in release order at some point, or like how'd you try navigating your way through some of it?
Well, the dumb kid, you're just watching these giant monsters fight.
Yeah.
But as I grew up, I was watching more in linear order. My favorite, of course, everyone says 54 with good reason. The original 1954 Gojira is a masterpiece. And then you have my personal favorite outside of 54, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, which is from the Heisei era. That's the late 80s to the mid 90s films. And there's also some fun dumb stories in there. Like I really enjoy Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster for being just completely insane.
Nice. Yeah, like the original is an allegory, right? Or am I like mixing that up with something?
No, you're right on the money. Gojira is a allegory for the nuclear bomb because you have to understand that movie was made less than a decade after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and how it paralleled a lot of the damage and devastation Japan went through at the time is a perfect mirror of it. You also have to understand that this movie came about because one of the major restrictions the Japanese government put on its film industry was no war movies. So this was Ishiro Honda, who was the director of the film. This was his way of getting, because he was a survivor and he was also a veteran of World War II.
Oh, wow. Yeah, like even if like the whole giant monster thing doesn't always appeal to me, like the behind the scenes stuff of how it came about is so fascinating to me. So would you say that like Godzilla was like sort of your gateway into King Kong, or did that come about like sort of separately and then sort of combined along the way?
Well, funny enough, I had known about Kong, but I never saw the original movie. In fact, I saw the 1970s movie first with oh, what's his name? The dude.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either, but I know which one you're talking about. It was the one where they kind of made King Kong more of a sympathetic character than he was in the original in that one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And it's actually kind of funny because I didn't know, I wasn't a dumb kid. I was a dumb kid, and they used to have these books in elementary school. And one of them said, yes, there was a book, there is a movie out there of Godzilla fighting King Kong. And I was like, that was my white whale for 5 years. Like I'm 6 years old and I'm hunting a white whale of Godzilla versus Kong movie. Because I was like, oh my, and this opened the doorway to me loving crossovers so much, of just seeing like what if this character met that character and stuff like that. It's goofy, it's stupid, but like I can't deny that final fight between Godzilla and Kong is really fun. So yeah, and also, you also have to give respect. Speaking of Kong, you have to give respect to Kong, because that 1933 film was a gateway for so many, artists and directors. Like a lot of people, you don't know how many people, not just Peter Jackson, but almost everyone in the film industry will point and go, yeah, Kong, he's the reason. The original King Kong movie is a major inspiration for a lot of modern day directors. So both of these monsters have so much cinema history behind them. If you want to just look, even from the original films that they're from.
Yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned like elementary school books, because I was just reminded that in third grade, I think it was. So have you ever heard of the Captain Underpants book series?
Yep, I used to read those.
Yeah, those are fun. So the author of those, Dave Pilkey, he also wrote a couple other books, and one of them was Dogzilla, and the other was Cat Kong. So I think I read those in like third grade. They're like these funny picture books, and I think there were like mice going up against them while they were like wrecking the city or whatever. So I myself was aware of King Kong and Godzilla. I'm pretty sure I'd heard. It's a certainty that I heard of them long before I read those books, but I didn't really watch any of those movies when I was very little. Like growing up as a little kid, like the closest was like that Rugrats episode where they're in the toy store, and I think Reptar fights this King Kong like toy, and then they end up time traveling somehow.
Yeah, that's why is there a time machine in a toy store? That was my, even as a kid, I was like watching, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I was like, even as a kid, I know it's a kid show, but like even as a child, like watching that Rugrats episode, I was like, what?
Yeah,
what?
Because Rugrats, like, there is an extent of like suspension of disbelief. The babies, they break out of their playpen and go to all sorts of places. But like some of the more outrageous stuff is in their imaginations. But in this instance, it was like there's an actual time machine in the toy store. It's just wild.
I mean, it's also funny that it's the same episode where you see toy Daleks in the aisles.
Yeah, I've seen that picture. Oh boy, like recently Paramount Plus like revealed a clip of this 3D animated Rugrats show that they're doing. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm kind of intrigued by it because I kind of do like the look of it, how it's basically
the Rugrats characters 3D animated, and like the animation style makes me think of like, I guess, how they would look if they were claymation, kind of like the aesthetic
Yeah,
looks nice and the characters feel like the characters, at least as far as I could tell in that little clip. So I am curious about it.
yeah, I did see it, and I really did like it. It feels just like an episode. I mean, CGI aside, it felt like classic episode. The sound effects, the everything. Um, Although it is sad that Chucky's VA is no longer with us, but the person they got to replace her sounds almost dead on.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't even think of that, but you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also like one of the few people who actually is nostalgic for All Grown Up. Like, I actually really liked that show.
Thank you. I love that show.
Oh, nice. So I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Also in Rugrats in Paris, we also got that like giant reptar like robot that the babies piloted, and they used it to fight like the snail robot that the other guy drove, right?
Yeah, and a VR, like, even again as a kid, I was like, "What?"
I mean, they have to go big for the movie, right?
But like first movie, it was just like they were just lost in the woods. Like that was all right. I mean, the only suspension of disbelief was the monkeys running around the forest and
Yeah.
the little vehicle they rode around in.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just caused billions of dollars in damage to one of the most ancient cities in history in giant robots. I mean, my dumb human brain was like, "Yay!" But like at the same time, I was like, "This makes no sense."
Yeah, and then we had I guess Rugrats meet Wild Thornberries or whatever it was called. I think it was called Rugrats Go Wild. So that was like another crossover thing. I was kind of underwhelmed by that one, but it is what it is, I guess. Um, but getting back to King Kong, like
Yeah.
the,
Yes, that's why we're here.
yeah. So the first time I ever watched anything King Kong related, I'm pretty sure it was the 2005 film that Peter Jackson did. I was like 11 when it came out, and I remember like a year or a year and a half before, my dad gave me this issue of Wired magazine that had an article about the movie and how Andy Serkis was doing motion capture for it, and I was like, oh yeah, the guy put Gollum in Lord of the Rings. That's pretty cool. And so I remember seeing that movie, the Jack Black one, with my dad and my brother in the theater, and it's a really long movie, but I was like really invested in it. And granted, I was creeped out by the giant bugs, especially the slimy ones. Like, kind of disturbed by how they're like killing off all the people. But
Yeah, that scene with the leeches absorbing Andy
yeah,
Serkis, it makes my skin crawl.
yeah, that's the exact scene I was thinking of just now. But I mean, hey, it's Peter Jackson's horror roots, right? Like, he made that movie in
Brain
the early
dead.
90s, Brain Dead. Yeah, and that even has a scene that takes place on an island that's called Skull Island, funny enough.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about gross, I mean, there's a baby zombie who burst through some poor woman's face.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, Brain
if
Dead
you
is
want,
hilarious.
yeah, it's hilariously bloody.
Yeah.
Seriously, people, if you have a really weak constitution, don't watch Brain Dead.
Yeah, I feel like people who are fans of like the first couple Evil Dead movies would really love Brain Dead. Like, you can tell, you can see the Sam Raimi influence on that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, so I think it was sometime after seeing the 2005 film that I caught some of the 1976 one on TV while visiting my grandparents on my dad's side. I think I caught like the end of it. But recently, well, not recently, but within the last few or several years, watched the 1976 one in full, and I think it did have some pacing problems, but like I said, that Jeff Bridges one, it adds more character to King Kong in my view, because I watched
Well,
that 30s one sometime before watching it in full, and I was like, huh, I kind of don't care about King Kong in this one. Like, it's impressive for its time, but I just wasn't into the original as much, if that makes sense.
I get it, but you know why that there's a perfect explanation as I mean, yeah, the movie editing was not that great, but there's a reason why it has some pacing issues.
Oh yeah?
Because the studio that was making that film, I think it was Universal, right? That made the '70s movie, right?
Let's see. It was distributed by Paramount and produced by the Dino De Laurentiis Corporation.
Yeah. So okay, but yeah, Paramount and yeah, because Universal is a part of this story. Don't worry.
Okay.
When RKO went under, the rights to King Kong were up in the air. So when they were selling off the rights to King Kong, it's someone who had to make a movie. So Paramount and Universal were the top two competitors. And essentially what had happened was Paramount got the rights first because their movie, the '70s Kong, was in more production. Like there was actually production and whatnot for it. So they got the rights. And that's why that movie was so rushed, because they were like, we got to get the movie rights.
Oh, nice.
And it was like,
Yeah.
you gotta be Universal. And technically, because I would need a list of lawyers to explain who owns what to King Kong, because the Kong rights, while they're technically air quote public domain, it's hard to say, because in case you haven't noticed, there's like 3 different Kongs by 3 different studios. But they're all like how you've noticed how Paramount has one Kong, Warner Brothers now has a Kong with MonsterVerse Kong, and Universal has the Peter Jackson one. The movie rights for the character of Kong, while they are air quote public domain, it's way more difficult to describe, because I would need a grand jury to explain it.
Okay, it sounds similar to the case of the Wizard of Oz adaptations, because I think some of those are in, like, the original story is in public domain, but with MGM, made the classic 1939 film, there are certain things that other studios can't use, like I think the ruby slippers are one of them. In the original story, it's the silver slippers, but the MGM one, like, made those iconic ruby slippers a thing. And there are other weird things, like the shade of green that the witch is. Like, they had to use a different shade of green when Disney made Oz the Great and Powerful, which looks like it's trying to be a prequel to that movie, but officially they can't say that it is because it's different company. But you can see what they're going for. Also, another Evil Dead tie-in. Sam Raimi directed that one, and it feels like a blatant remake of Army of Darkness, his third Evil Dead movie, to me.
It does when you really think about it.
Yeah.
I am so ready for him to Doctor Strange.
Yeah. I mean, Multiverse is your last name, so you gotta look forward to Multiverse of Madness.
Well, I'm just hoping for a Bruce Campbell cameo in Doctor Strange.
Oh yeah, it's gotta happen. It's weird. I actually just watched a movie called Congo.
Conga. Oh boy, that movie.
Yeah, Bruce Campbell. It has some screen time in that, like at the beginning, so it's kind of a weird tie-in.
Yeah. Well, there's Congo, and then there's Conga. Conga was a movie in the '50s that was a blatant Kong ripoff from a British studio, and that movie hadn't seen the light. It got sued almost into oblivion. It's only now we're seeing it more on like stream sites.
Oh, okay. I was talking about Congo from 1995.
Yeah. But bottom line, like the rights to Kong, that will give you that will make your head spin, man.
Yeah. Also, I just recently watched the new episodes of this cartoon on HBO Max called Close Enough. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's from the creator of Regular Show. And
yeah, I've actually got HBO at Max now, so now I'm catching up with the show.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's a part where the daughter is like, Dad, we watched this really old movie at school called King Kong, and it had Jack Black in it. And like that just made me feel so old hearing her say that.
That was like that was like a metaphysical kick in the dick.
Yeah.
It's like It started to get to the point where it's like 2006 is going to be back in my day.
Yeah, like back in my day, we went up to the third Saw movie. I don't know. I was trying to think 2006 stuff, and the first thing that came up was Saw 3. I don't know why.
Back in my day, Halo 3 was where boys became men. No, like that's the thing. Like if you had beef online, you settled it in Halo.
Right, but I mean, getting back to like just the genre of kaiju movies in general, why do you think people love kaiju movies so much?
I think a lot of some people will tell you, "Oh, it talks about the deep evils of man and how we're the real monsters," and I'm like, "Get the out of here." I respect that it's an art. It's a very hard art, especially for suit actors and whatnot. But here's the thing: people just like to watch monsters kill each other. This is the real reason. I'm sorry to say that there are hardcore kaiju fans who really acknowledge that this is a genre that can have great effect, be a great commentary on mankind. But for the general public, you just want to see monsters blow shit up.
Okay, so yeah, then I'm not on the wrong track for thinking that like some of these movies just are there for people to just watch action they don't have to think about. I guess like I don't know how else to describe it. Like they don't always feel thought-provoking to me, at least the few that I've seen. Like to me, it's like they're kind of just there. I guess this also kind of ties into the question of like, why do people love versus movies? And like for me, it seems kind of hit and miss depending on the execution. But I do think you're kind of right that like overall, people just want to see like who will win and like what attacks will they use on each other, and it's kind of dumb, but it's a form of entertainment, I guess.
Yeah. It's the other thing is and we'll get into the movie, but it's nice to actually have a movie where we have a definitive winner. I know people are like, oh, but we let people draw because it will let the other fans down. I'm like, it's a fight. Right. You stop until the fight is over. That's my thing, is that there are some versus movies, and if you do a versus movie, and I'm speaking of comics, where you can do a crossover and it can have a deep meaning to it and be very sweet and kind, but 9 times out of 10, it's more like, let's have a meet. Like, I just finished reading the Transformers versus Terminator comic, and it's just fun summer popcorn stuff. It doesn't try to be deep and meaningful. It doesn't try to be... It knows what it is and goes on its merry way. Now, you will have, funny enough, there is the Kong Planet of the Apes crossover, which does have some deep meaning to it. And it's very character-driven, but at the same time, like, not every team-up or versus has to be like that. And I fully acknowledge that. This movie, thankfully, does do a fun versus, but it also has some character to it. So it's kind of like have your cake and eat it too, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like you can have your cake and also the chili pepper on the top. Like you just get it all.
Yeah.
You mentioned comic books, and in these recent MonsterVerse movies, there have been comic book tie-ins. We've had Godzilla, the 2014 film. There's Godzilla Awakening, which was like the prequel to the 2014 film. And then we got Kong Skull Island, which then got a sequel / prequel called Skull Island Birth of Kong. And then we got Godzilla Aftershock, which bridged the gap between Godzilla and Godzilla King of the Monsters, kind of. I think it was closer to King of the Monsters, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
it was
the Monsters.
Yeah, it was kind of a quick read, and I like forgot some of it, other than the fact that the way that the creatures are drawn look really cool. And like, dare I say, the creatures look better in those comics than in the film, to my eyes, for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah. And then we've got Kingdom Kong and Godzilla Dominion.
Yeah, like those prequel comics to Godzilla versus Kong, which add some context. And I really like the titles of these because Kingdom Kong sounds like Kingdom Come, obviously, like that's the intention, I guess. Although I guess Godzilla Dominion is kind of funny because we also got Jurassic World Dominion coming up.
Yeah, it's a better title because I felt like Aftershock and Awakening were just like, these are lazy.
Right. Yeah, they were kind of doing it kind of felt like they were doing a pattern, like Godzilla and then A words, which I kind of liked, but I'm like fine with like Dominion. It's just funny, like the idea of seeing Godzilla's perspective and like just chilling or whatever in this lead up to the movie, and then Kingdom Kong, obviously, like people face him and like there's all this chaos and whatnot. So, but like both of these like build up to this movie. But like overall, what have been your impressions of like comic book tie-ins like these? Do you think that they add something, or are they just kind of there?
For me, they're just kind of there, although I do like Birth of Kong. I felt like that had some great story to it, especially dealing with Kong's origin. Awakening and Aftershock were all right. It's more like, but the main villains are pretty unimaginative, like the Muto Prime and some kind of eel. Like there wasn't a lot of thought process for either of the enemy kaiju in there, and the stories just kind of felt like, hey, get ready to watch 2014 or King of the Monsters.
Yeah, I do agree that Birth of Kong felt more compelling than the others, because I think for me it just comes back to that scene where we see King Kong as a baby and like the tragedy that befell him, and like there's this really beautiful and like heartbreaking quote that one of the characters says. One of the characters said he wept although there was no one to hear him, but still he wept. Even without context, like that could just apply to a person who's faced some struggles and they have like no one around them to be there for them, like as they weep about what has befallen them. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that one more so than the others. But like, what have been your thoughts on the movies leading up to Godzilla versus Kong overall?
They've been all right. I think my personal favorite still is Kong Skull Island. Speaking as a Godzilla fan, yeah. Not to say I haven't liked the Godzilla films, but at the same time, like I feel like there was something, like looking back, there was something lacking with Godzilla 2014. King of the Monsters was really great. Was good, was really good. But for some reason, I just keep coming back to Kong Skull Island, of just how like it's shot and how like the story plays out. But on a whole, these movies know what they are and don't pretend to be anything like deeper. King of the Monsters does try to play the whole, and I'm not saying human stories are bad in a giant monster movie. You need the human you need to care about the human characters, or it's just going to be like you're just watching a Michael Bay movie. I'm sorry. But this one, like the King of the Monsters cast is just like it tries a little too hard, and it sucks too because Michael Dougherty is really good at characters. If you watch, like especially interpersonal family relationships, especially if you watch Krampus.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember seeing Krampus a while ago.
Yeah, so that it played off a little too hard, but yeah, I feel like in Godzilla versus Kong though, the human stuff like is handled better for some reason. Like they know that this is a monster story, but at the same time, it's the characters that everyone just cares about, and you care about them enough and how their character arcs enough just to be like, okay, these guys aren't intolerable.
Yeah, because for me, in order for me to be invested in movies like these, like I want like to care about the characters. And I know that's funny coming from someone who like also been a fan of like slasher movies, which are notorious for not having that many deep characters. But yeah, like watching Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island felt like kind of a slog for me. Like the effects are great, but narrative wise, they feel like a slog for me to get through. I did think it was kind of funny that 2014 had Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, but as husband and wife, which was kind of weird. And then Skull Island had Samuel L. Jackson, Tom Hiddleston, and Brie Larson, like three actors who've played prominent Marvel characters. And I think this was even before Jackson and Larson were in this other movie called A Unicorn Store together, which was actually a pretty fun movie. But King of the Monsters, I felt was like an improvement on the human side, because like I do kind of see what you mean about them trying maybe a little too hard, but I do like that it asks this question of like, is it worth unleashing all these, like unleashing a monster if it means preventing global catastrophe, even if it means like having to wipe a city out? And like I don't have, like, lots of people will debate the answer to that, and that's what's fun, like that people will have these different arguments over it, like it's something that's kind of thought provoking. But yeah, also, am I alone in thinking that Elizabeth Olsen and what's her name, the mom from Bates Motel who's in Godzilla King of the Monsters?
Yeah, I know who you're about.
Yeah, it's Vera Farmiga. Like, am I alone in thinking that they have similar facial features? Because when she showed up in the beginning of King of the Monsters, I thought to myself, oh, okay, they're picking up with Elizabeth Olsen, because I just glanced and then I looked again and was like, wait a minute. And what, like, am I the only one who thinks they look kind of similar?
Yeah. It's also funny that the girl who plays, I mean, excuse me, the man who was in King of the Monsters, the dad, I'm forgetting the actor's name, he was in the Peter Jackson Kong movie. So now he's in another Kong movie.
Oh, I didn't realize that, but
Yeah, he played the actor, that asshole actor in Kong, in the '06 Kong movie.
oh yeah, the '05 one.
Yeah, 5, yeah.
Oh, that reminds me, did you ever see the Asylum ripoff of that? It was called King of the Lost World. It was like loosely based on the Lost World novel, but included like a giant ape that's blatantly supposed to look like King Kong.
Yep.
Yeah, that was, yeah, that was tough to sit through for me. Me and some friends from the Sci-Fi and Horror Society watched another Asylum film called Snakes on the Train, and it was like really bad. But I also watched A Princess of Mars, and while it's not as faithful to like the original book, it does carry over some of the interesting ideas of it, even if it is modernized and has a low budget setting. So like I guess like Asylum stuff does have its hits and misses, so to speak. Like they're not big hits, but like they can be fun to watch sometimes. So I don't know, I might check out more of those.
Yeah.
But getting back to Godzilla versus Kong, what'd you think of how they introduced Gia and like her connection to Kong?
I liked it. It's nice to have a, it was kind of sweet, and it was kind of it was a little, I felt like it was a little forced to try to tie it in with Skull Island, saying like she was related to one of the like loosely related to one of the soldiers. Yeah, I think they were trying to say like she was distantly related to one of Tom Hiddleston's characters, and I'm like, how does that work? Did he and Brie Larson's character go back, or did he bang one of the Iwi when no one was looking?
Right. Yeah, it's something that's not really fleshed out that much, but like she, like Kong, becomes an orphan, and I guess that's why they like form this kinship together, and like Kong feels a need to protect her. So like she kind of becomes like this anchor for him, like this, like his new purpose, which I thought was interesting because we're so used to like the love interest thing that floats around. But like here, it's like he's trying to protect this orphan, like he sees himself in her, kind of, which made the comic Birth of Kong like really worth reading. Like it kind of enhanced that a bit for me.
Absolutely. It's a very touching it's a very touching scene, especially when they're like really like just them and how Kong interacts with the girl. It's it's really heartbreaking because it feels like they even say like in the movie, um Kong knows she's alone, and that's like, and like they ask like, how does Kong know she's alone? And he's like, and they're like, orphans know, and I'm like, oh,
I mean, I'm sure that sparked some outcry, but yeah, like if it's weird because like they're not able to like speak a common language, but it's like they know somehow, and it's it's weird. Like it reminds me of the recent Planet of the Apes movies. Like they use sign language and are able to like convey like what they're feeling, and they're just well written. And so I saw shades of that in this, like in how Kong was portrayed here, which I really appreciated.
yeah. Um, I also like how like they've shown that after the events of Skull Island, he's been trapped on Skull Island, and like he likes staying there, but at the same time he knows like I'm on house arrest.
Yeah, like he has to like stay at home and is not able to like leave or whatever. It's weird.
Yeah. I do like that opening scene where it cuts to like of King of the Monsters, where that scene where Ghidorah is calling the other monsters, and Kong hears it, and it just like upsets him because that was actually referenced in the King of the Monsters novel, actually, where they actually refer to Kong that he did hear Ghidorah's cry, but he was like, "I don't care. I don't want them to come here, and if they do, I'm gonna beat the shit out of them." So it was nice, it was a nice little nod to the book.
So is that like the novelization of the film, or is this like a different book with the same title?
Oh, novelization of King of the Monsters.
Okay.
It's easy. Like this is not like the MCU where it's only 4 films, a handful of comics, and a few novels. That's about it, and that's easier to connect with. So it was a nice little dig for that. I especially really like again going back to like Kong does like throw stuff at the barriers that are holding him in Skull Island. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't want to leave, but like at the same time he's like, if I do, I want to get out. Like um, I also like how like it all the start of the movie is like it is Kong trying to like just enjoy himself and kill some skull crawlers. Like they show this one of the larger skull crawlers in the film, and you just see Kong's foot just go back.
Yeah, it's like a day in the life sort of thing for him.
Yeah. And then he hears Godzilla's roar, and he just starts freaking out. Like, and they're like, "Oh, what's happening?" And they radio in like, "Oh, Godzilla just killed Ghidorah. He's the new alpha." And they're like, "Oh, well, I guess we know what's pissing Kong off."
Yeah. And so we get Alexander Skarsgård's character, who's a geologist. His name is Nathan Lind. And so he kind of puts together a team that brings Kong on a boat. And we also get Eileen Andrews, who's now like trying to protect Gia. And she kind of compares that to how Kong was protecting her. And so we're slowly getting these relationships between the human characters. But of course, like this boat ends up in the spot where Godzilla is, and that's when the Titans start to go at it.
Yeah. I guess we'll talk more about Godzilla in a moment, but this first fight was definitely worth it because I was afraid he was going to do like shaky cam and jump cuts. No, this is exactly like the same kind of filming they did for Skull Island, where you clearly see the monster fights. It's clear as day. There's no like shaky cam, no jump cuts. There is one, but I was like, it's forgivable. It was quick and forgivable. But and the other thing, and I think they took this from Pacific Rim, like you feel the punches, like there's actual like weight, especially like when Kong does that first punch to Godzilla. Like there's weight to these monsters and their hits.
Yeah, because he doesn't just do it like in a super quick motion. He does it like he pulls it back slowly and then moves it forward in a way where you see the momentum of it, and it feels real. And it's funny that you mentioned shaky cam because while I do really like Cloverfield. I do think it's not easy to watch again after that first viewing. Like, it becomes obsolete because it's like, oh, do I have to watch the shaky cam stuff again? Like it doesn't have as much rewatch value as like its follow up or 10 Cloverfield Lane, which itself wasn't a monster movie, but was a really good like psychological thriller.
Yeah. Fight itself is really is just brutal. It's slow moving, and also I like how they show, hey, there was a whole fleet here. It's gone now.
Yeah.
like Kong doesn't care. Like he only cares about, he only cares about the girl, but like everyone else, get the out of the way. That was my big thing, was like, are they going to play it safe? Like, no, Kong and Godzilla are going to destroy each other, and they're not going to care who's in the way. It's interesting to note that even though Kong is clearly out of his element, they still say like, hey, he can still put up a fight. I like how they've really, and they kind of played with this in Kong Skull Island, where we know that Kong isn't going to be able to just brute strength his way against Godzilla. He's got to think. So I like how they implement a lot of like Kong's like ingenuity in this fight. Like, oh, okay, he's underwater, and he grabs like a piece of metal and starts using it to like breathe when he figures out, oh, I can breathe through this.
Yeah, like he's very crafty, which, I mean, you can't just have two opponents who are exactly the same. Like, they each have their own strengths and their own weaknesses, which makes things interesting, I suppose.
Yeah. But Godzilla does win that fight, and Kong has to flee, which is, again, like, it's a reference to the original movie where Godzilla handed Kong's ass and he just left.
Yeah, and so while this is all going on, Millie Bobby Brown's character from King of the Monsters, Madison, she's like investigating Godzilla's, or like she thinks that there's something causing his erratic behavior, and she suspects that the Apex Corporation has something to do with it. And she has a friend named Josh Valentine who's like helping her out with this investigation. What'd you think of her character like in this movie?
I liked it. I do think it was a little more like, hey, we have Millie Bobby Brown, let's get that Stranger Things money. So,
Yeah,
but no,
definitely.
I think like they gave her a very nice story, even though like you find out that Godzilla's not being driven. Like, people are wondering what's aggravating Godzilla. Is it Godzilla? Like, who's causing Godzilla to be mad? Nope, Godzilla's just doing this of his own volition. He's literally going, okay, the human race had their chance. I'm a scorched earth this shit. And Millie Bobby Brown's character is just heartbroken by this, because the whole time she's just been inwardly punishing herself for not being able to save her mom in the last movie. So she thinks if she can like say like, oh, Godzilla, Madison basically says, if Godzilla isn't to blame, just like my mom wasn't to blame for all those monsters. So she's projecting like Godzilla, thinking Godzilla's being framed like her mom intention. She's trying to cover up the fact that, hey, Godzilla's not someone is doing this to Godzilla. He's not doing this of his own volition. And it's more like, I don't want it to be real that Godzilla's doing this for himself. And just like how my mom slaughtered so many people and died for nothing.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I get you. Like in King of the Monsters, it was such a strange moment for me seeing like Madison like toward the end when Godzilla seems like he's being defeated and they need him to like take care of the other stuff. And then he comes back up again and she turns around, sees him and smiles as if she's like rooting for him. Like, that was such a weird moment to see. But yeah, the investigation that she and Josh do, and they also get the help of a former Apex technician named Bernie Hayes. And like it feels realistic seeing seeing her get heartbroken over the revelation, and it makes her whole investigation feel kind of obsolete. Like, she feels like it went nowhere and that all the work trying to solve this was for nothing. But I mean, ultimately, like, even if the investigation was kind of obsolete, it was really cool seeing how she's become more independent. Like, she's grown more from her experiences with all this.
It also, like, again, this is clearly because Adam Wingard, the director of this movie, said that the original Godzilla versus Kong was one of his favorite Godzilla films, and he's really playing into that because Godzilla is the villain in here. And I don't mind that. As a Godzilla fan, I don't mind Godzilla being the bad guy. He was the bad guy in his first movie. He was the bad guy for a good chunk of his own movies. He wasn't even a good guy until Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, and even then he was like anti-hero, and then he slowly shifted into hero, and he's bounced back from hero and villain. So to have him play the main villain, that's good. I know there's a third monster in here, and we'll get to him in a moment.
Yeah.
Having Godzilla as the main antagonist works, and having Apex in here, like, you think they're going to be like, they do play a hand in making the third monster in here, but Apex in here is more like, no, we're not doing anything to Godzilla. He's doing it himself. It's almost like they basically say Serizawa was an idiot for trying to bring him back because all he did was justify Godzilla's anger towards us. Because they clearly say, like, maybe Godzilla turned on us the moment we dropped a oxygen destroyer on him. So I like that. I like how, because Godzilla is intelligent. He is an intelligent creature. So he would definitely be like, it'd be like one of those Telltale games where it'd be like, Godzilla will remember that.
Yeah, like you mentioned the whole thing of how, like, the monsters might be kind of the good guy or the bad guy. It kind of depends on the story, right? Like with some versus movies, like Freddy versus Jason, they kind of made Jason the anti-hero against Freddy, like making Freddy the main villain. And in the first Alien versus Predator movie, they made like the Predator the anti-hero against the xenomorph. So sometimes it feels like there's this obligation to make one of the two monsters like the hero against like the one that's a villain, even if it may have been like an anti-hero before. It's kind of like the Boba Fett thing where like Boba Fett is whatever the writers want him to be, right?
Yeah. And it makes sense to make Kong the hero. He's intelligent. He clearly cares about humanity. Whereas Godzilla's kind of indifferent. So I was totally fine with them. Even from the first trailer, I was like, from the get-go, I was like, so Kong's the hero.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind that. And again, it really plays into Godzilla don't give a shit. Also, as a Godzilla fan, it's nice to see Godzilla kill people indiscriminately. Like, I know that sounds really cold, but like, it's so nice to see Godzilla kill people in here. Like, it is nice to see him just carpet the whole area of soldiers in atomic breath. And a lot of people were in the trailers were saying, "Oh, it's not Godzilla, it's Mechagodzilla in disguise." And then I watched the movie with the biggest smile, biggest eating grin on my face, thinking, "Is it Mechagodzilla? Is it Mechagodzilla?" Oh, I called it from the get-go. I called it the moment it was leaked by the toys way back before the movie came out. When they revealed Mechagodzilla, I was like, oh, so Ghidorah is just going to be, the Ghidorah head is going to be inside, like, piloting the Mechagodzilla body. Like, they're using its brain to, like, pilot it. So I was like, called it right from the get. Like, the moment, like, Kong takes, like, a piece of building and just smashes it over Mechagodzilla's face, cracks it open, and you see Ghidorah's, like, dragon eye peeking out, I was like, yep, I knew it.
I was really impressed by it because Mechagods, I feel like they were able to make it work. Like they were able to modernize the idea in a way that fits this. Like, I feel like it's not, like it definitely doesn't look 100% real to me, but I mean, I feel like these movies aren't always trying to do that, but like with what they had, I was really impressed with how Mechagodzilla looked. But what did you think?
I liked it. I still think my personal favorite of the American Mechagodzillas of the two is Ready Player One.
Oh, nice.
That's a really good design. This one, it's like it looks too much like an iguana, and the hands just feel weird. But I like how they like use the hands made sense, especially like they could change weapons. I was like, okay, the hands can morph into different weapons, kind of like, and it actually had finger missiles like the '60s Mechagodzilla. I was like, okay, I forgive it. So it was a good. I think it was. They just needed someone for Kong and Godzilla to team up against, even though in the long run that didn't help. It was like Godzilla and Kong were just like, "I'll kill you in a minute. Let's team up against that guy."
Yeah, it was like this team up moment. But like they knew that once they were done with that, they had to like face each other again. Like I feel like there are a bunch of stories that do that where it's like we're fighting each other, but then they get a common enemy, and then like that becomes the thing for like the middle portion of the story, and then it's back to like the original too.
Kind of like how in the Frieza saga where Goku and Vegeta like buried the hatchet for a quick second to fight Frieza.
Oh, yeah, I'm not super familiar with Dragon Ball as much as my brother is. But one of the funny things about Dragon Ball that I remember someone telling me is, oh, well, so one time me and my brother were like visiting our friend, and he pulled up Netflix and he was about to watch Dragon Ball GT. And I was like, what does the GT stand for? And he looks at me and he's like, who cares? And then we both laughed.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. So Mechagodzilla was a neat threat. But I feel like his appearance was like a little too much like kind of like Doomsday, where he just showed up just because we wanted to see him in the movie. Like he just needed to be something for the two characters to fight again, like Doomsday in Batman v Superman.
Yeah. The moment that like before Batman versus Superman came out, like the moment that Doomsday showed up in one of those trailers, like that was a moment of, wait, they're doing that, and it was like a sign for me and a bunch of other people that like, oh, this movie's not gonna be, it's probably gonna be bad, you know?
Yeah, I will admit that it is handled a little better, where Mechagodzilla is meant because he's created by Apex and Ren Sarazawa's son, and he the whole time while he's building the monster is like, my father had good intentions, but like he put the monsters over humanity because he thought that we could learn from the monsters, but no, it's very, and he's even like, and yeah, I tried to follow father's footsteps, but it's so clear that the monsters don't care about us. So we need our own way of protection. So that's why he builds it, and he thinks like putting Ghidorah's severed head into Mechagodzilla would help him better control it. He didn't, but I love how he didn't consider, oh, Ghidorah's still like sentient in there. I thought he was brain dead. Uh-oh.
Yeah, like Brain Dead, the Peter Jackson movie.
Yeah. So like his whole thinking was he needed to run Ghidorah's synapses through, like he wanted to run Mechagodzilla like faster, I guess. Like that was the conceit, which was like, all right, you just wanted to have that cool reveal of Ghidorah inside Mechagodzilla, and you didn't care how it was done. All right, I get it, movie.
Yeah, and to be fair, it does. Well, I don't know if this makes a huge difference, but it does happen much earlier than the Doomsday appearance does. Like Doomsday was toward the end of the movie, and this was more like around the halfway mark. So I felt like there was more time to breathe and to deal with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like they were hyping him up and, building into like, and Ren Sarazawa is a neat human villain. He's not even really a villain. He's just a guy who's like, we're gonna get wiped out if we don't do anything. Like Godzilla don't give a shit about us. What do we do? So I like that. I like a little more complex human villain in here. Again, I shouldn't say villain because he's just a dude who's like, he's sorry that his father died, and he's not angry about it. It's more like, I tried really hard to coexist with them, but Godzilla's made it very clear he doesn't want to coexist, so we got to protect ourselves. And I'm like, that's fair.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I do feel like the human characters have gotten progressively better throughout this particular film series. I mean, I think it's really refreshing, especially with my relation with this particular genre. And, when you compare it to like the DC EU, like the pacing is kind of similar. Like, well, maybe with DCEU it was faster because it went from Man of Steel straight to Batman versus Superman, and then like 2 more movies and then Justice League, but this is like the 4th movie of this particular MonsterVerse. So like if you're just looking at the number of movies, it seems kind of quick, but like they do take time to get through. And when you think about it, it took like 6.5 years between Godzilla 2014 and this one. So
Like there's a better payoff, you know?
like I guess King of the Monsters was more like Batman versus Superman, and how it was like opening up the world a bit more. And like
I would say King of the Monsters is more like Iron Man 2.
right. Like not in terms of like I'm not saying it's like BVS in terms of quality, but it's kind of like the attempt to bring out more of these like big like villain slash monster type of things, like fleshing out the world more. And like Kong Skull Island, like it was really good that they did a Kong, like they gave Kong his own movie before like all of this, because you know the criticisms with BVS was like maybe Batman should have had his own movie before BVS, and Superman should have, like I still firmly believe Superman should have gotten his own trilogy, because like that might have been handled better. But I don't know where I'm going with this, but the point is, like, I feel like the payoff for this MonsterVerse was refreshingly well done, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I will say another gripe I have with this, just one, and this is just for the MonsterVerse on a whole, just once, if we continue with these movies, I wanted Godzilla to go to Japan. Just once. He never, in none of them, and you may be saying, oh, but what about Godzilla 2014? He didn't make landfall in Japan. It was Hawaii. And like that drives me insane. Like Godzilla, you should be just once, I want him to go to Japan. Just wanted him once to go to Japan, but we ain't getting that. And we'll get to that in a moment.
Right.
Do you want to talk about like Kong in the Hollow Earth?
Yeah, we could talk about that.
Yeah. So Kong in the Hollow Earth, because they built this up in Skull Island, and then they talked about they touched on it a little in King of the Monsters, but it was cool to see like Kong, like after his first fight with Godzilla, he thought he was chasing after Godzilla, found his way to the Hollow Earth, and like he's following around because he never knew his parents and all that, but he, like, as he's going around this very beautiful world, you see him like through his eyes, learning about the rivalry between his race and Godzilla's, as well as like the family he never knew.
Yeah, it really adds more perspective, because I mean Kong has been long without his own family, so it's been tough for him to find like his own kinship, which is why I guess he kind of formed a connection with Gia, and then we get like this sequence that you mentioned.
Yeah. I also like all the monsters they showed in here, like the Warbats, which were called also, like originally they were called the Nazuki. The Warbats were really fun, those flying cobras. It was nice to see like Kong take on mini bosses. I even like the little nod to Gamera in here, like just a little nod, like the sculpture of him in the background. I was like, he hasn't gotten a movie since 2000 since 2007. I mean 2004. Excuse me. Yeah, he hasn't gotten a movie since 2004, but we gave him a statue.
Yeah, and he also fights like a giant scorpion, and it reminded me of well, two things came to mind. Like in my head, I thought Scorpion Kong, like, you know, Scorpion King, the Rock's character.
Okay, that's a stretch.
And it also reminded me of like the spider monkey from Spy Kids 2 Island of Lost Dreams, or whatever it was called.
Again, a stretch, but again, that's a stretch, but I'll go with it.
Like just thinking of the two and like imagining if they were combined, like it kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah, I do like the scene where one of the Warbats like coils around Kong, and like he's trying to force the jaw open. I'm like, oh, that's a reference to the 70s movie.
That reminds me, there is a moment in the movie where King Kong tries shoving a tree down Godzilla's throat, and I've seen a GIF of this. Like this happens in one of the older movies, right? Like,
yeah, in the original Godzilla versus Kong, he shoves a tree down his mouth, and I'm not gonna lie, I cheered when I saw that moment where where Kong like jams it down his throat, and Godzilla's like, like, and he like shoots a small blast of fire, burns Kong's hand, and Kong is just like, okay, that was dumb. It's like that scene in Predator where Arnold tries to break a branch over the Predator's head, and it just breaks. He's like, bad idea.
Yeah, and of course this spawned some memes of people like sharing that image with the caption "Eat your broccoli" and whatnot. So that was funny.
Yeah. I do also like how when Kong finds like there's a whole battlefield in the Hollow Earth of his like bones of his people of his race and Godzilla's race, just a whole battlefield.
Yeah, like it shows that like their races have been going at it for a long time, and it's like you can see in Kong's eyes how chilled he is, like he's noticeably frightened seeing the bones of his own people, and that there's like this never-ending fight, and it's almost like there's this existential dread within him that you can sense, where it's like, man, we have to like do this like all the time for all eternity.
Yeah, but I do like when like you see like Kong's visibly shaken, and then he's sad when he sees like a small baby like skeleton in between its parents. He's like,
yeah, that was so sad.
like Kong like collapses to his knees, and he's just like, oh my god, it's me.
Yeah, it's like that moment in Ice Age when Manny sees that cave painting, like it's very tragic, like, and I felt like Kong feels very real here, like you can feel his emotions, and it's just so good.
Yeah, and the other thing is like he doesn't roar, he doesn't like make any sound. He's just like, you can see he's just destroyed by his facial expressions alone.
Yeah, like we've come a long way in like cinema that depicts apes in general. Like the recent Planet of the Apes movies were like so innovative with like their commitment to the CGI and making us feel for them. And so like we've kind of gone back and forth with like King Kong and like those apes, and it's like, yeah, like these are like staples of ape cinema, and they've helped to evolve how human they can feel in these types of movies.
Absolutely. I also like that moment where right after that he like Kong has that resolve to like, all right, now I'm gonna take the fight to him, and he takes the like one of the bones and dorsal fin of a Godzilla corpse and just makes that axe, and he's just like, this will get him. And I love that scene where he take that second fight between Kong and Godzilla, where Godzilla sees the axe and he's like, he has this visible expression of, you mother, oh, you desecrated my people.
Yeah, the axe kind of looks like a halberd in some angles. It's really cool. Like they go at it in this. He's basically going medieval on his ass, so to speak.
Yeah, and I like how Kong, when he uses the axe to protect himself the first time, like the atomic breath absorbs it. Oh, that's neat. And like he didn't even think about that. He's like, oh, I know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. I do admit that like during all this fighting, I was kind of distracted by the giant Dr. Pepper billboard in the background. But I did think it was kind of funny when Kong picked that billboard up and tried using it as a shield, and like even use it to like bash Godzilla's face every now and then.
Yeah, I guarantee you that was a reference, because in the American cut of Godzilla 1985, basically had to get endorsements, and the only person who would endorse him is Dr. Pepper. So I guarantee you that was a reference to Return of Godzilla.
Oh, nice. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I also like the moment where Kong like grabs like a giant Dr. Pepper can thing and just throws it at Godzilla's head, and it just bounces because it's just paper and all that. And he just bounces off his head, and he's like, "Uh-oh." Like I thought that would. He's like, Kong's like, "Uh-oh, I need to rethink my plan here." But yeah, so do you want to talk about the ending?
So I thought the music was really great during this ending sequence, and it's like as they're fighting, you're not 100% sure like who's gonna win. Like it feels like it could be either opponent's. It could be in either opponent's favor. But then we get the outcome, and like, what was your reaction like when this happened?
I was like, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, I knew this was going to happen, but at the same time, when it happened, I was like, oh, we went there. Kong kills Godzilla, and I'm like, oh my, they did it because. But at the same time, I'm like, I was expecting that because they were not, Warner Brothers could only hold on to the Toho's rights for so long, so I kind of expected that. But I didn't like when you see it, it's like it's still like holy crap.
Yeah, like, and you see like the blood like spewing out of his mouth, and it creates like a bit of a flood. So, like, even in Godzilla's death, there's still a bit of a disaster, and people still have to evacuate and whatnot.
Yeah, and he's like
Yeah.
gagging. He's like gagging, and his eyes are flaring. His spines are flaring. It's a painful death. And Kong's like jamming the what's left of his axe into Godzilla's stomach, like deeper and deeper. And I'm like, and he's just twisting it, and Kong's just roaring in his face. And I'm like, damn, dude.
Yeah, it's like so visceral. Like, it's, you can tell that he's doing it for all of his people. Like, not, and I guess the humans as well. Like the human characters are kind of funny in this at certain moments. Like, there's a moment where, like, while they're fighting, there's this store called Cost Mart, which I guess is a Costco knockoff. And one of the characters there, her name is Maya Simmons, is like shown there throughout the movie, like super worried that they might step on her store, and like she decides to like run away from it, like when it's clear that they are gonna step on it. But yeah, like when, like, just seeing Kong's raw emotions, like once he's defeated Godzilla, and seeing like the fires that result from that, it's like, I guess for him it's a cathartic moment, and you feel it in the emotion, like of like the CGI expressions and of the music, which just feels very elegant, and like how all the humans just watch in awe and amazement, both in person and on like TV screens.
Yeah, like it's almost like watching Muhammad Ali knock out what was his name? From that fight. Oh man, I'm forgetting. But it's like that. It's like watching Muhammad Ali win a fight. And Kong is just like after he's like when Godzilla's dying, Kong like sits down next to him and he's just like, all right, I'll stay with you. I'll stay as you die. Like he puts his hand on Godzilla's chest as he's like the breathing gets slower and slower, and he's like, hey, and Kong's almost like, I'm sorry I had to do that, man.
Yeah, it's very Obi-Wan and Maul, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of weird, but also, well, like, it's one of those weird things where it's like they didn't really have to do it, but it's also kind of cute to see it happen. So like, why not?
I will admit it was a bit much to see Kong close Godzilla's eyes.
Yeah,
I was like, all right. I was like, that was all right. Back it up.
right. Well, I mean, you could sort of headcanon that maybe he did it as a precaution in case, like, maybe Godzilla like will shoot like dead laser eyes if his eyelids aren't closed. But that's just headcanon for me, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, that was it was I felt like, and I love that scene where all like it mirrors King of the Monsters, where all the Titans come together to see, like, Rodan is the first one there. Oh, now I'm in charge, because he's basically Starscream in this universe, and like Kong grabs him by the throat and is like, nah, bitch, and throws him at his feet, and Rodan's like, all right, you the boss.
Yeah. And we also see like some of the people who watch all this on like the news and whatnot. Like, some of them were placing bets on like who would win between Godzilla and Kong, and it felt so meta. It was kind of funny.
Yeah. And I love that final scene of Kong just pounding his chest, roaring as the other Titans like bow to him. And I'm like, huh, it's a brand new MonsterVerse.
Like, it's like poetry. It rhymes, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a nice end. What do you there were two after credit scenes. Yeah, I guess we'll talk about them.
Yeah, so in one of them, like in one of them, there's like this hint at like a potential crossover with Pacific Rim, I guess. Like they kind of show like one of the suits, and it's like, oh, are they gonna do something with this? And it's like, I don't know. Did that feel surprising to you?
Yeah, seeing like what looks like them building Gypsy Danger or a prototype for it, I was like, all right, that because again, like you were trying to put Pacific Rim in the rest of the MonsterVerse, so
It does look like they are hoping to like set up a crossover somehow.
yeah, like maybe they're gonna retcon a lot of Pacific Rim, which I'm fine with. I like Rim.
They're gonna call it Atlantic Rim instead.
No, no. So that was one. And then the end credit scene, I don't know how to feel about it because I'm like you're trying to get off Toho's legendary. What's going on here? They basically have a moment where they cut back to like this aquarium, and I'm like, are they doing what I think they're doing? And they have this guard whistling, singing in the rain. I'm like, oh, they're doing it. And then you see all the fish in there like dying of an oxygen destroyer, and I'm like, oh, good, legendary version of Destroya. You were probably confused by the
like that went over my head. I figured it was something for like the diehard like Kaiju fans. I'm guessing.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Destroya was a creature born in the Heisei era, the final Godzilla film in the Heisei era, which is the 80s and 90s, that was basically the death of Godzilla. And Destroya was a mutated being from the Oxygen Destroyer that killed the first Godzilla. So I'm like, we don't need Godzilla characters anymore. Rodan's still here. I don't know why, but like, we don't need Godzilla characters anymore. So we're just gonna have Kong fight Destroya now. All right. Like, it doesn't feel right without Godzilla here. You know what I mean? It feels like we're taking two steps forward, one step forward, two steps back. We kill Godzilla, but we're still going to use his rogues gallery for Kong.
I mean, it's kind of like what happened with Iron Man and like the Mandarin not showing up until Shang-Chi, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I literally had an ugh moment because I was like, why do we need Destroya? Godzilla's dead.
I mean, I'm not like super familiar with the older movies because there are like 50 of them or something, but I can imagine like maybe cloning could happen. But I'm basically guessing that just simply based on those 2 episodes of the Clone Wars about the Zillo Beast, and like they mentioned cloning at the end and do nothing with it in the show.
Yeah. But now, now the MonsterVerse is going forward with Kong, and I'm like, that's cool. I guess they just didn't want to do anything they just didn't want to have any rights issue thing with Toho, and Toho can now do whatever they want, which is weird because Toho is more of it's not like people like a lot of G fans seem to think Toho has a lot of power with Godzilla. Here's a fun fact: they don't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're not as big as a studio as they once were. They've diminished greatly over the few years.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, I would never have guessed that.
So yeah, now Toho can I guess start producing Godzilla films again, and we can actually have like a Kongverse now.
Yeah, I mean, this movie made me love Kong even more, so I'm all for seeing what more they do with him, and like any other connections to other giant monster movies, I'll probably still be confused about, but I'll be there for the ride, I guess.
Yeah.
Did Toho do Shin Godzilla? Like I've heard of that one and how it's like it looks more like the older ones.
They did do that one, yeah.
Okay, I do kind of want to see that one because I've seen like images of it and the aesthetic looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess with that we can go into final thoughts and scored out of 10. So what are your final thoughts for Godzilla versus Kong and your score out of 10 and unit of measurement for that score?
All right. I loved it. It was definitely like it was a great wait for. It was a great build up. It took some turns I kind of predicted, but at the same time I loved it. I love the action. I loved how they explained like the backstories for both Godzilla and Kong and the human characters didn't annoy me. I'm going to give it 8 trees down Godzilla's throat out of 10. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So for me, like I've said, kaiju movies aren't like a genre I normally gravitate toward. But that being said, I feel like King of the Monsters and now this one have like made me more interested in this series, like with the ideas they've presented. It's still, I'd still rank this below some other movies that I prefer from other genres. But that being said, I found this one to be the most entertaining of the 4 films in this series. Like the pacing didn't feel like as much of a slog for me when I saw this in the theater. So I'm gonna give this one 7 out of 10 Dr. Peppers.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So thanks again for being on Delayed Replay, Mr. Multiverse. Where can people find your stuff?
They can find me on YouTube with Mr. Multiverse, and that's it.
Yeah, like you just type Mr. Multiverse in the search engine and you're like right there. Yeah, and as for my plugs, you can find me at Steven Schinder on Twitter and Instagram, Steven Schinder Storytelling on Facebook. I have a novel called Lemons Look Like Rain, which is of the fantasy, horror, and comedy genres. More info on that at stevenschinder.com, and you can find it on Amazon. You can also find me on a Star Trek podcast called Star Trek Culture. That's on the YouTube channel Culture Slate. We've been rewatching the original series and also talking about Star Trek news. And if you want to email this podcast, Delayed Replay, you can email delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you think about, I don't know, Godzilla and Kong movies or just about anything. And we might read your thoughts on the show. And yeah, so the next few Delayed Replay episodes after this one will be sort of a trio of video game movies. So next will be Mortal Kombat, and then Uncharted, and then Tomb Raider 2. So look forward to those, dear listeners. And without further delay, have a good